Hello everyone, welcome back to Call Me Nakomi, my YouTube channel dedicated to the Wheel of Time. Today my video is going to be about my favorite book, that is The Knife of Dreams. Now, after all my rereads, it's still the book that gets me the most excited. It really starts to tie up a lot of different plots and character plots. Now, please do me a favor, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel as I try to not sweat to death out here in the beautiful sun. But go ahead and do me that favor. I really appreciate it. You guys will help to help the video and the channel to basically start to grow and continue to grow. And I just appreciate just hearing, what you guys think. Just let me know what you think. And let's get into it. So what I'm gonna do is kind of give a spoiler-filled synopsis of the books. It's no other way. This book is the 11th book. Yes, it's the 11th book of the series. It's the last book that was written by Robert Jordan. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. It's the I don't want to say authentic, because definitely Brandon Sanderson did great on his 3 books that he had, or 4 if you consider, if you include New Spring. But at the same time, it's his last chance at basically really telling the story from his specific point of view and in his words. So I don't really think that specifically has any type of impact of why I feel like this is my favorite book. But at the same time, I guess it's something that to be taken into account while you're reading it. I just feel like it touches all the characters, all separated, basically doing their own thing, and still, except for Nynaeve, who is currently at the time with Rand. But basically, each of the characters basically achieve something and tie up a character arc of in their story, or at least progresses their character arc. So the book starts off with a quote from the prologue: "The sweetness of victory and the bitterness of defeat are like a knife of dreams," from A Fog and Steel by Madrid Comadrin. Now that is a book that actually gets quoted a lot in this series, because Mat, basically being the military mind that he is, keeps quoting it and telling people, if everyone basically picks up on it, it's just like, I need to be as good as Mat. I need to read that book too. So I really enjoy. I like the fact that it starts off like that, basically quoting a book that Mat always quotes. So basically, the book start off with a Galad point of view. He is going to fight the Lord Captain Commander and actually beats him in hand-to-hand combat in retribution for the rape and assumed murder of his mother. He ends up actually beating the Lord Captain Commander and ends up becoming the Lord Captain Commander by White Cloak law. So, but that of course gets a little bit more murky as he basically goes along. Then it goes to an Egwene chapter all the way in the tower. It's just this book is amazing. It goes to Egwene, and she basically realizing that in her captivity she can actually win from inside, because the fact that Elayne has eroded all relations within the Ajahs in the White Tower. So it's almost as though she just needs to basically sit back and help to sow the seeds of dissent, and it'll fall apart on its own. Then next, Morgadian basically calls a Forsaken Zoom meeting. They're actually all in person. They meet together, and it's found that Semiraj, Demandred, and Messaana are basically allied together, trying to put themselves ahead of the Forsaken battle, basically. And so without an ally like Ashamael, Grendel is basically left with Olsengar to become her ally. They're basically talking and trying to figure out what each other's doing when Moradin comes in, and Moradin basically tells them, all right, stop bumping around. Basically, the time is at hand. The last battle's about to begin, so you can't be going about your own business anymore. Everything you do must be basically towards winning the last battle for the Shadow and for the Dark One, not only to basically push forward your own ends and means. Basically, he basically lets them know that they still cannot kill Rand, but what they need to do is basically kill Perrin and Mat. So that basically also puts forth a chain of events where people are going to start to basically hunt Mat and Perrin even more so than they've been doing before. Next, Perrin is out in the field with Elayne and the rest of his party, and he meets with some Seanchan soldiers, and they basically strike a deal for them to help him rescue Faile and the rest of those captives, and basically in return they'd be able to get all of the Aiel Wise One channelers, and just specifically just for Savannah, the Seanchan lead officer Tylee Kirgon basically is intrigued, but when she finds out the amount of channelers, she realizes that there's nothing that she's not gonna be able to do. But then he pulls out the letter that he got from Elayne basically, and convinces Tylee that it's a good bet that he could actually pull it off. So she decides to agree to help Perrin rescue Faile. Another thing Perrin finds out is that Aram has been spending time with the Prophet, which obviously is concerning, but he doesn't have any time to really basically stop and do something about that. He just has to let that be. Next, we have a Mat chapter where he's out and he's basically doing some shopping and decides to pick up a piece of black yew. Yeah. A piece of black yew so he can make himself a new Two Rivers bow, and also finds a present for Tuon. The present that he finds is basically a very rare horse known as a razor, and he basically buys it for her and keeps it secret until he could give it to her, which is very important. Foreshadowing. Amazing. When he gets back to the camp, to the menagerie camp, basically he's speaking to Eludra, and basically Eludra commits to leave with him whenever he decides to actually leave the menagerie to help him and to create her dragons, mostly to fight the Seanchan. But then the creepy part comes. Basically, their entire menagerie is moving along a road, and they're trying to get to a new place where they could sit down and settle for the night and camp, maybe basically open up, the menagerie for a show or two. And so they see a village out in the road, and then they find out that the village is actually a long gone dead village. Peddler coming the other direction actually ends up stopping, thinking that this is a real village, and not realizing that it's not. They're not paying attention to him at all. Basically ends up getting caught and dies, and the entire village basically melts away back into the ground, and is basically the peddler is gone except for just his hat that's left on the road. This shocks and scares everyone in the entire party of the menagerie that's moving along, because this doesn't happen, obviously, people just basically disappearing out of nowhere. But also the Aes Sedai and Tuon realize that this is actually a sign that the last battle is approaching, because the threads of the pattern are basically becoming unwoven. And so they all decide to go as fast as they can past the spot where the village and the peddler were, and settle in somewhere for the night as it starts to rain. Each person is shaken up, but they decide to basically take it in stride, get drunk, and think of good times. But Mat notices that Tom is basically reading a letter again, and so he finally decides to go and ask him about the letter. And so Tom gives him the letter. So the letter's from Moraine, and she's telling Tom that basically, when you get this, everyone's gonna think I'm dead, but I'm actually not dead. I found out that the circumstances that lead to my supposed death basically were going to happen. So for everything to work out the best way that it possibly could, I decided to make my decision knowing that it could possibly lead to my death. But I should not be dead. I'm actually alive and with the Aelfin and Ealfin, and you, Mat, and somebody else could possibly save me if you decide. So Mat is shocked. he is conflicted that he still basically feels a bit of anger towards Moraine, that she basically took him from his lowly village, but at the same time is remiss to leave Moraine to the Elfin and Eilfin, especially when he can actually possibly save her, and he feels lucky all the time. So he feels like he could actually do this. So sooner or later, between Oliver telling him where this possibly could be, the Tower of Genji, and telling him how he could possibly get in, this is information that he got from Brigitte, he tells him that he could possibly do it, and so he agrees to do it, with Noel deciding to be the third person. Another cool thing that happens is basically one of my favorite things about Mat, or about Mat point of view chapters, is the dice rolling in his head. I absolutely love to hear that basically, the dice is rolling in his head. It's rolling even harder. It stops basically when something important happens, or when basically what needs to happen happens. I just love to hear that. And so as soon as he agrees basically to rescue Moraine, his dice starts to another set of dice starts to rattle. Mat decides to agree to take Tuon into a village. While they're there, they actually get ambushed by a bunch of people, and they find out that some people are hunting Tuon to kill her. So he decides that the smartest thing, he and Tom decide that they need to leave the menagerie and basically try to get Tuon to someplace safe. Then we have an Elayne story. I know. Some people basically really feel as though this slows the whole entire thing down, but there's a lot of interesting things that happen during the Elayne chapters, point of view chapters basically. But something interesting happens here in this book, basically with Elayne and Aviendha. So basically Elayne and Aviendha are in the palace, and they just finished taking a bath, and so while they're getting dressed, Elayne decides to see if Aviendha could read any of the Ta'angreal. She gives her one, and basically she immediately realizes that it's the horn dagger basically, and so she realizes that while she holds it, she feels as though the Dark One cannot see her. A couple of others that is very interesting that she basically discovers: a slim black flexible rod that you could change how much pain each blow gives from 1 to 100, a metal cap used to direct a device or machine, a small hinged ivory box that plays many selections of music, iPod, a flat white bowl for looking at things that are far away, kind of like a pensive, a tall vase with vines to gather water from the air, several figurines to speak to people at long distances, tons of cell phones, a bent black rod that can cut many types of things, a crystal man that keeps away vermin, a blue stone carving for growing holes. Now I thought about that, and I was like, that sounds like a talisman of growing that the male Aes Sedai gave to the Ogier. Sounds like it. A bronze statue of a stout bearded man holding a book that holds thousands of books. I thought that was absolutely cool, and many of our other Aes Sedai are going to find that to be very interesting too when they find out about that Ta'angreal too. So revealing that to me as one of Aviendha's talents was actually really cool. I thought that was an interesting talent to have. But right after that, basically the wise ones come and take Aviendha away to complete her training. So Elayne and Aviendha basically say their goodbyes, and they won't be seeing each other again until 3 books later. So the next big part of the book is with Rand, and he's still hiding out in Algaren's manor. Of course, Catswain, Nynaeve, and Logain and Bashir, they're all basically with him, with Loyal, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And Rand basically is still decided that he wants to make peace with the Shan-Chan, because the last battle is coming, and he knows that he cannot fight everyone. He speaks to the group about his visit to see the Elfin and Eilfin. He tells them that the Elfin basically say that to win the last battle, the East must be one with the North, and the west must be one with the south, meaning that basically everyone must be unified to win the last battle. So he realizes the only way to do that is for the Seanchan to be part of a coalition meant to fight the last battle. But while that's all happening and he's speaking with them about it, Loyal's parents arrive basically with Aerith and basically take Loyal away to marry Aerith. So that basically happens. Loyal runs away and basically meets up with his mother, and they immediately marry him to Aerith. But while he's talking to them, they tell him that basically the Great Stump is meeting, and the reason why they basically are meeting is to speak about opening the Book of Translation. That means that they would leave the earth, or leave the land of men basically, and leave them to their own devices while they're about to fight the last battle. Loyal realizes how dangerous that might be, leaving the humans, because basically if they lose, they won't have anywhere to really go. So he basically tells them, they ask him, well, if you were seeking in front of the stump, what would you basically say? And so Loyal says, you know, a nice sweet little speech basically saying that we never left the humans basically when they really needed our help to fight the shadow. The only time we left them to their own devices was during the War of 100 Years, when they were fighting over Hawkwing's empire, and that didn't have anything to really do with the shadows. So that didn't need their assistance. But for success against the Dark One, the humans basically need their help to win. And so he convinces them that he should be able to talk in front of the stump, especially now that he's married, and married men can talk in front of the stump. While he's out there, while he's talking to them, he looks through the window and realizes that the manor is about to get attacked by tens of thousands of shadow spawn. So he and Master Aemon basically get up and start yelling, Trollocs are coming, up axes, and clear the field. Rand, basically getting a whiff of all the shadow spawn and evil, basically realizes what's going on and alerts everyone else as that this imminent attack is coming. So a big battle commences. He starts to hear basically fire at the oncoming shadow spawn. He realizes he can't do anything, and that's because Lews Therin Telamon has seized the power before he could, and so now Lews Therin is basically in control of his body, and he doesn't know what Lews Therin is going to do. Lews Therin has been basically crying about wanting to kill himself for who knows how many books, but so he is absolutely terrified, but realizes that he needs to fight or else everyone's going to die right here and right now. He convinces Lews Therin to start fighting and start firing, and so the weaves that Lews Therin uses to attack the shadow spawn are brand new weaves that he's never seen before and no one else has ever seen before. He actually teaches some of the Ashaman basically some of these weaves by seeing him do them out there, and somehow, just barely, he is able to basically with the other channelers fight off this attack. But he realizes that that was very close, and they need to actually really start to do something to basically get ready because it's imminent. Another interesting thing that happens there, Varen actually decides to leave the manor, saying that she can assist or help Rand better by leaving and doing some other things. We know now basically that what she does is she leaves and she goes to help Mat and to help Egwene. But she leaves a message basically for Rand saying that he can trust Cat Swain. Next comes one of my favorite parts of the entire book. Another one of my favorite parts of the entire series. So Nynaeve and Lan are basically back in their rooms, and Nynaeve is just saying that, you know, she's tired, and Lan basically is looking a little tired, but also he looks concerned. She asks him what's wrong, and he basically says that he knows the last battle is happening and where he needs to be is in the Borderlands, where his lost nation is, and protecting Tarwin's Gap, and saying that basically Rand is wasting time because this is obviously about to start at any moment. Nynaeve basically makes a deal with him that she will take him to the Borderlands right then if he will promise her something, and the promise that she makes him give her is that he will accept any help that is offered to him along his way to Tarwin's Gap. So he decides to accept this help, thinking that she would basically take him directly to the borderlands near Tarwin's Gap. She basically opens a gateway and they go through, and when he realizes she didn't promise him to take him to Tarwin's Gap, she promised him that she would take him to the borderlands. And so what she did was actually take him to the very end of Saldea, which is called World's End. And so he has to basically ride the long way just to get all the way to Tarwin's Gap, but she made him promise that along that way he would accept any help, because he's planning on going there to die by himself, fighting who knows how many shadow spawn come out. But she's thinking. She leaves him basically and runs back through a gateway before he could do anything or move. And then the next place she goes is a inn somewhere in the borderlands. She basically approaches a merchant and asks him to send pigeons to every person who accepts pigeons in the area and in his network, and tells them to spread the word that Elayne Mandragoran is riding for Tarwin's Gap. Will he fight alone? And so the merchant is so moved, along with a couple of other people in the inn, that he promises her no, he will not fight alone or ride alone. And he begins to cry. And I tell you, every single time I read that part, or every single time I listen to that part, Michael Kramer does an excellent job at that part. Even though it's a Nynaeve chapter, it's basically it comes from the point of view of the merchant, and I drop a tear every single time. It's awesome. Then we go back to an Egwene chapter. We're back in the tower, and it's a chapter called Honey in the Tea. Interestingly enough, I remember Rafe Judkins doing a Q&A saying that basically they were asking him something about his favorite chapter, and he just said Honey in the Tea. And so the only Honey in the Tea chapter that I know of is this one, basically, or that comes to mind. Please let me know if you know of another. I don't believe so, but please let me know. I always like to be, to get my facts straight. But basically in this chapter, at first you kind of look at it and you're just like, what's so special about this one? But it's actually the first chapter where Egwene really starts to make headway as far as convincing people that Elaida is bad for the tower. She meets with, instead of going to novice classes, which she is far too advanced and basically has no trouble or no problem antagonizing the accepted that try to teach her. Even being, drugged up on fork root. So they decide to say, okay, let's just basically send her with Aes Sedai. And so while she's there with Aes Sedai, she has some defeats, but more victories, where she convinces Aes Sedai that, she's smarter than she appears, and she should not basically be where she is at, or in the circumstance that she's in. And they actually start to give her invitations to join their Aja when she becomes Aes Sedai. But little do they know, this woman's a full-grown Aes Sedai. Then we go back to Mat and his group as they basically have left the menagerie. They're on the side of the road. This is basically a classic Mat to Viren moment. They're on the side of the road, basically. They're having some food. Tuwan is basically watching him eat like a pig, and he doesn't care. He's just like trying to stuff his face, and so he's wiping his hands on his clothes and doesn't even care, throwing bones into the grass. Basically, Tuwan comes up to him and asks for a kiss. And so he's just like, wow, finally I'm going to get to, have some intimacy with her. And he doesn't care that he's in front of his friends. He's just, I'm going to kiss you. So he decides to lay a kiss on her, and just leaves a light little romantic kiss. And she's just like, I must remind you of your mama. He's like, I bet, here you go. Here, we're about to rock your world. So he basically gives her a real kiss. And so he finds out she was just using it to find out whether or not the wounds that he had when he got into a fight in that last town have gotten infected, and they did. So she was basically going to mend his wounds. So sweet of her. She's a cold-hearted bitch, but at the same time, you really start to realize, she has a real soft side. They make a cute couple. Out of nowhere, Vannon comes back, and he comes back with another person, Talmanis. Out of nowhere, basically, Talmanis and the rest of the band, or at least the rest of the band that he brought with him to come and look for Mat, has ended up in the same area where they are. Basically, he went on to help out the king of Mirandy to secure his throne in Mirandy, basically. And after he did that, he realized he felt a tugging by Mat, that Mat might need him, and Mat needs him. Isn't that crazy? So basically, you know, Mat has a whole army, and even though Mat's kind of upset because he told him to stay with Egwene, Egwene really didn't need him. So he decided to move and come back to Mat, who really would need him. So anyway, Mat's more so just upset that his orders weren't being followed, but he gets over it. They're on their way back to the band, and Mat is starting to figure out what's going on, because Talmanis is saying basically that they're pretty much kind of surrounded by Shanshan troops, and they're not exactly sure what is going on, but they look like they're looking for something. So the next chapter we get is actually a Tuon chapter, which is basically definitely far and in between as far as how many of those we actually get. But I love Tuon chapters. She's a tough woman, basically, but I can't wait to see who they decide to cast as Tuon and see how they basically do. She needs to be lovely, but yeah. And basically what she's doing is she is following Mat as Talmanis leads them back to their camp, and she's just like, hold on, who is this guy that I've been basically messing around with his head the entire time? Like, I feel like I don't even know the dude. Like, he has his own army, and he actually is competent and is respected and well respected by his followers, and he seems as though he's competent as far as being a leader of an army. And she can't exactly even believe it. So while she's following him, she's thinking about basically what the guy, she's listening to what they're saying to each other, Talmanis and Mat, and realizes that, oh, he knows the Dragon Reborn. And she remembers that she spoke to him about the Dragon Reborn, and he actually lied to her, and that was one of the lies that she basically missed, that he told her. So Mat's getting good at it. At the same time, she's still trying to process the kiss that Mat basically put on her. But all the same, she realizes that he basically has a plan, or he is trying to make a plan to try to keep her safe and keep his promise to her. And then we jump back to Rand. Now, he basically is going about his plan to meet the Daughter of the Nine Moons. They decide to meet somewhere outside of Abu Dar. She basically told him that he can only bring a certain amount of channelers, so he only does, and what he makes a promise to Ben in bed that he would take her with him as one of his escorts. So he brings her, he tells her to stay close to him. When he's walking up to the Daughter of the Nine Moons, he realizes that something is happening, and her form starts to change. Somebody's channeling basically is interrupting her weave, and he notices that that's not Daughter of the Nine Moons, is actually Semiraj. By the time he realizes it, she decides to attack him, and to protect Min, he decides to put his hand up in front of Min and ends up getting his hand blown off. But he's so just hardened inside his head, basically, that he decides to take it all in stride and tells the Damani, which he decides to let go, to go back to the Daughter of the Nine Moons and tell her that he still wants a peace with her. And they decide to keep Semiraj as a captive. Jump back to Perrin. This chapter is called The 54th Knot. In this chapter is on the 54th day that Fail has been captive, and he's been away from his wife, and he decides that it's going to be the last knot that he ties in a leather cord that he's been keeping. So the plan goes off without a hitch. While he's there, Aram has been turned by the prophet, and the prophet has convinced him that he needs to basically kill Perrin. So he tries, and Perrin's severeness saves him, because another Aiel basically shoots Aram full of arrows, saving Perrin's life, but goes on without trying to kill Perrin, which is, good luck. He ends up basically finding Fail and ends up killing one of the Aiel that basically was helping Fail, which is very sad for her and the other ladies that was basically with her, but Fail saved. Then my last favorite part of the book basically is when Ferrikari catches up with Mat and the band and Tuon, and Mat fulfills his promise by basically letting go when she finds a way to basically get back to safety, and in return basically completes their marriage vows that began when he first kidnapped her. He didn't realize before basically that how great of a gift was the horse that he bought her, which was a very rare horse because she basically collects horses, and so that's something that Shunchan royalty really appreciate and like. He fulfilled his promise. She basically decides to marry him, which basically ties him to the Shunchan army, Shunchan people, and is a big thing that helps with the side of the light in the last battle. So that's my favorite book, The Knife of Dreams. It's a long book, but at the same time it's just so filled with great parts. I have literally like pages long of notes that I took while I was basically doing my last listen through. You know, there's so many other things that I could have included, but I was just trying to keep this as short as possible, and Lord knows I failed. My other favorite books are The Shadow Rising. This is not in any kind of particular order. The Shadow Rising, Fires of Heaven, The Dragon Reborn, which is basically Mat's first real chapter. I'm going to speak about that in another video, basically the fact that it's when you really start to like Mat, because every other Mat chapter that had Mat in it is basically from someone else's point of view. So personally, you're getting everybody else's impression of Mat, which is really not fair, and makes me also think about how other people who are supposed to be his friends really view him. Then of course, then I have to put in there The Great Hunt and The Gathering Storm, which actually which follows Knife of Dreams and Memory of Light. I have to put it in there personally. I love The Memory of Light. So you guys, I hope you have liked the video. Please press like. Let me know your comments in down below. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I so enjoy speaking to you guys, and I love the fact that you guys come back to see me every once in a while. Well, please email me at callmenakomi@gmail.com, or reach me at some of my social media accounts. Call Me Nakomi on Instagram, and also Call Me Nakomi1 on Twitter. Till then though, I hope that everyone's doing well and everyone's being safe. Take care of yourselves. If you call me Nakomi.